Use a warm, empathetic tone. Thomas Williams pushed open the glass door of the Greenfield Resort and stepped inside. The cool air hit his face after the warm summer day in Brighton. He had just arrived from London after a week of big business, meetings. His muscles ached from sitting in boardrooms all day, and he looked forward to swimming in the resort's famous pool. Thomas walked to his room first. He had booked the best room at the resort, even though he knew no one here would recognize him. He changed into his simple black swimming trunks and grabbed a clean white towel from the bathroom. Before leaving, he checked himself in the mirror. His polo shirt was crisp and new. His flip-flops were expensive but plain. He looked like any normal guest. The walk to the pool area took him through the elegant lobby. Soft music played from hidden speakers and fresh flowers decorated every table. The resort was everything people said it was: beautiful, clean, and expensive. Thomas had stayed at many hotels in his life, but this one impressed him. When he reached the pool area, he felt the warm sun on his skin. The pool sparkled blue in the afternoon light. Palm trees provided shade around the edges, and comfortable chairs lined the deck. Only a few other guests were there. A couple reading books, a family playing in the shallow end, an elderly man floating on his back. Thomas had barely taken one step onto the deck when he heard fast footsteps behind him. He turned to see a woman in a crisp white shirt and black skirt hurrying toward him. A name tag on her shirt read, Emma Thompson, Resort Manager. Her blonde hair was pulled back tightly and her face looked pinched with anger. "Excuse me, sir," Emma called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Can I see your room key?" Thomas felt confusion first, then a familiar sinking feeling in his stomach. He had hoped those days were behind him. With practiced calm, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his keycard. The plastic card had his room number, 412, printed clearly on it. "Of course," Thomas said politely, holding out the card. Emma snatched the keycard from his hand and examined it like a detective looking for clues. She turned it over several times, holding it up to the light. Her eyes narrowed as she studied every detail. "This doesn't look right," she said finally. "Did you steal this from a guest?" The words hit Thomas like cold water. Around the pool, other guests stopped what they were doing. The couple reading books lowered their magazines. The family in the shallow end stood up to watch. Even the elderly man stopped floating and turned toward the commotion. "I'm sorry?" Thomas asked, though he knew he had heard correctly. His voice stayed steady, but his heart began to race. "I've seen people like you trying to sneak into pools where they don't belong," Emma said loudly. Her volume seemed calculated to attract attention. "This is a private area for our paying guests only." Thomas took a deep breath before responding. Years of dealing with such situations had taught him to stay calm. Anger would only make things worse. He kept his voice level and polite. "I am a paying guest," he said. "I checked in yesterday." Emma crossed her arms over her chest. Her stance was defensive but aggressive at the same time. "Really? Then why haven't I seen you before? I know all our regular guests." Thomas felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. He could feel the eyes of other guests on him. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. A few seemed to be enjoying the show. "I think you should leave right now," Emma continued, her voice getting louder. "Or I'll have to call security." The familiar sting of discrimination burned in Thomas's chest. He had faced this kind of treatment many times in his younger days. Back then, he would walk away quietly, shoulders hunched with shame. But he was not that young man anymore. He had worked hard, built a successful business, and earned respect in his field. Yet here he was, being judged by the color of his skin rather than the content of his wallet. "Please check your computer," Thomas said quietly. "I'm staying in room 412. Emma's face remained hard. She refused to meet his eyes, as if looking at him would somehow prove him right. Instead, she grabbed the radio from her belt and held it to her mouth. "We have a situation at the pool," she announced. "Someone is pretending to be a guest. I need security here immediately." Thomas stood perfectly still as security guards approached. One was tall and lean, the other shorter but muscular. Both wore the resort's uniform and carried themselves with authority. They looked at Thomas first, then at Emma. "This man claims to be a guest," Emma explained to them. "But I've never seen him before and his keycard looks suspicious." As the guards prepared to escort him away, Thomas noticed movement in the corner of his eye. A young girl, no more than 8 or 9 years old, watched from behind a pillar. Her dark skin glowed in the afternoon sun. Her eyes were wide with fear and confusion. Something in her expression reminded Thomas of himself at that age, watching his mother face similar humiliation at a hotel in Manchester. The memory hit him like a wave. His mother, Grace Williams, standing in a hotel lobby with her cleaning cart. A manager accusing her of stealing because she was in the guest area. Young Thomas watching from the corner, feeling helpless and angry. His mother had walked away that day with her head down, but Thomas saw the tears she tried to hide. "I'll leave peacefully," Thomas said to the security guards. His voice remained calm, but something had changed inside him. "But may I please speak to the owner of this resort?" Emma laughed, a sharp sound that echoed across the pool deck. "Mr. Richardson is a very busy man. He doesn't have time for people like you. People like you." The words stung, but they also strengthened something in Thomas. He nodded slowly, maintaining eye contact with Emma. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him break. "Thank you for your time," he said formally. Thomas turned and walked away from the pool. He kept his back straight and his steps measured. He would not run. He would not show fear. As he passed the young girl hiding behind the pillar, he gave her a small nod and a gentle smile. He wanted her to see that dignity could survive even this. Inside his mind, thoughts raced. He had connections, resources, and knowledge that Emma Thompson could never imagine. But more important than any of that, he had experienced the pain of discrimination himself. He knew how it felt to be judged unfairly, to be made to feel less than human because of something you could not change. The plan forming in his mind was not about revenge. It was about change, real change that would ensure no child would have to watch their parent face such humiliation again. No guest would be judged by their appearance rather than their reservation. As Thomas reached the lobby, he glanced back, one more time. Emma Thompson stood by the pool talking to other guests, already forgetting about him. She had no idea that in the next few days, her entire world would change. She had no idea that the man she had just humiliated held the power to transform not just her future, but the future of everyone who worked at the resort. Thomas Williams had a plan, and it started now. The end use, a warm, empathetic tone. That evening, the sun began to set over Brighton as Thomas sat in his rented car outside the Greenfield Resort. He had parked at the back of the lot where no one would notice him watching the building. The black Mercedes was comfortable, its leather seats soft against his back. Through the windshield, he could see the resort's lights turning on one by one as darkness fell. His phone buzzed against the console. Thomas picked it up and saw 3 missed calls from his secretary, Diana Peters, at Williams Property Group. There were also 5 unread messages. He knew Diana would be worried. He always answered her calls immediately. As he scrolled through his phone, Thomas smiled at a message from one of his hotels in Manchester. The manager had sent pictures of the new lobby renovation. The project was going well, and guests were already leaving positive reviews. His company now owned 18 hotels across England, Scotland, and Wales. He had built something his mother could never have imagined. Thomas's mind drifted back to his childhood in Liverpool. He had grown up in a tiny flat on the 3rd floor of a rundown building. The elevator never worked, and rain leaked through the ceiling in winter. His mother, Grace Williams, had worked as a hotel maid since Thomas was 5 years old. Every morning she would leave for work at dawn, carrying her cleaning supplies on the bus. He remembered watching her return home tired, her hands red from cleaning products. Sometimes she would cry in the kitchen while cooking their simple dinner of pasta or rice. Young Thomas knew it was because of things that happened at work. Guests who treated her badly, managers who blamed her for missing towels, other cleaners who talked behind her back because of her skin color. One day, his mother would tell him, wiping her eyes, Things will be different for you, Thomas. You'll have choices I never had. Those words had pushed him through school, through university, through the early years of building his business. He started with one small apartment building, fixing it up himself on weekends. Then 2 buildings, then 5. He sold his first hotel when he was 30, making enough profit to buy 3 more. Now at 45, Thomas Williams was one of the largest real estate developers in Europe. But he made sure almost no one knew his face. He preferred to work quietly, observing how his staff treated guests, especially those who might face discrimination. Last month, he had made his biggest purchase yet, the massive beachfront property next to Greenfield Resort. The deal cost £2 billion and took 6 months to complete. The land stretched along the coast for half a mile, with direct beach access and views of the English Channel. It would become Williams Beacon Hotel, his flagship property. Thomas had plans to make it special. Not just luxury rooms and fine dining, but training programs for underprivileged youth, partnerships with local charities, and strict policies against any form of discrimination. He wanted to prove that success in business could also mean doing good in the world. But Thomas never forgot where he came from. That's why he often visited hotels as a regular guest, booking rooms under his assistant's name or using a different credit card. He wanted to see how staff treated ordinary people, not the owner of the company. And sadly, even with his expensive clothes and confident manner, he still faced prejudice because of his skin color. Today's incident at the pool had stirred memories he had tried to bury. But this time, he had the power to do something about it. His phone vibrated again, showing a call from James Moore, his lawyer and longtime friend. They had met at university, where James had defended Thomas against accusations of cheating, accusations that had nothing to do with his work and everything to do with racism among some professors. "Hello, James," Thomas answered, pressing the phone to his ear. "Thomas, I just got your voicemail about Greenfield Resort," James said. His voice was concerned. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Thomas replied, though his voice carried the weight of what had happened. "But I need you to investigate them thoroughly. I want to know everything about their policies, especially their treatment of minority guests." James was silent. For a moment, he knew Thomas well enough to understand what this meant. "Of course. Should I be looking for anything specific?" "Just the truth, James," Thomas said, watching as Emma Thompson walked past the lobby windows inside the resort. "Find out if what happened to me today is a pattern or an isolated incident. And please arrange a meeting with the owner, Charles Richardson. Don't mention my name yet." "Understood. I'll start tomorrow and have something for you by the end of the week." "Thank you, James. I appreciate it." After ending the call, Thomas sat in silence for several minutes. He thought about the young girl who had witnessed his humiliation at the pool. Her face had reminded him of himself at that age, watching helplessly as adults treated his mother poorly. He remembered how powerless he had felt, how angry and confused. The memory was vivid in his mind. He was 7 years old visiting his mother at work because their neighbor could not watch him that day. His mother had tried to keep him hidden in the staff break room, but the head manager had found them. "What is this boy doing here?" the manager had demanded. "This isn't a daycare center." His mother had apologized repeatedly, explaining the situation, but the manager had made her leave work early, docking her pay for the day. As they waited at the bus stop, his mother had cried quietly, and young Thomas had promised himself he would become rich enough to buy that hotel one day and fire that manager. That promise had driven him for decades. And now, watching Greenfield Resort's lights across the parking lot, Thomas felt that same determination. But this time it wasn't just about personal revenge. It was about creating lasting change. He started the car and began driving slowly through the parking lot. As he passed by the main entrance, he saw families checking in, valets taking luggage, and doormen greeting guests with wide smiles. The resort looked perfect from the outside, elegant, welcoming, professional. But Thomas had seen behind the polished exterior. He had experienced the prejudice that existed despite the fancy uniforms and expensive decorations. And he knew he was not the only one. How many others had faced Emma Thompson's discrimination? How many had walked away quietly, their vacations ruined, their dignity bruised? At a red light outside the resort, Thomas made his decision. He would not just investigate Greenfield Resort. He would buy it if necessary. He would transform it into a place where no guest would be judged by their appearance. And he would make sure Emma Thompson understood the true cost of her prejudice. As he drove back to his hotel in London, Thomas thought about his mother again. If she were alive today, she would be proud of what he had accomplished. But more importantly, she would be proud of why he had accomplished it. Not just for money or prestige, but to ensure that other children would not have to watch their parents face humiliation because of their skin color. The drive took 2 hours. During that time, Thomas's mind worked through the possibilities. He could simply report Emma to the owner. But would that change anything? Or would she receive a warning and continue her behavior more carefully? No. Thomas needed something more, permanent. Something that would change not just one person's attitude, but an entire system that allowed discrimination to thrive. Tomorrow, he would begin putting his plan into action. Tonight, he would rest and prepare for the battle ahead, the end use. A warm, empathetic tone. 2 days passed quickly after Thomas's call to James. On Wednesday afternoon, rain pattered against the windows of Thomas's London office when his phone rang. He recognized James's number immediately and answered on the first ring. "Thomas, I have the information you requested," James said, his voice serious. "You were right to be concerned." Thomas sat up straighter in his leather chair. His office on the 40th floor overlooked the Thames River. Usually the view calmed him, but today his focus was entirely on James's words. "I found records of 5 complaints against Emma Thompson this year alone," James continued. "All involved guests of color." "Go on," Thomas said, gripping his phone tighter. His free hand formed a fist on his desk. A Nigerian businessman was asked to prove he could afford a room. The records show he had already paid for 2 nights and was a returning guest. Emma made him show his credit card and passport again. "What else?" Thomas asked, his voice steady but his heart racing. An Indian family was questioned about stealing towels. They had simply asked for extra towels because they had 2 small children. Emma accused them in front of other guests in the lobby. James paused, then continued. A young black couple from Birmingham was told their wedding anniversary reservation was lost, even though they had confirmation emails. They found out later that Emma had forgotten to tell the restaurant about their booking. "And the resort? Management?" Thomas asked. Each time, Emma either dismissed the complaints or blamed the guests. She told Mr. Richardson that the Nigerian businessman was difficult and the Indian family was demanding. She said the couple from Birmingham must have made a mistake with their dates. "What about Charles Richardson?" Thomas leaned forward in his chair. "He seems unaware. The resort has over 300 employees and he's rarely there. He travels between his 5 other properties and trusts Emma completely. She's been with the company for 10 years and has always received good reviews from white guests." James lowered his voice. "Here's what concerns me most. She knows how to hide these incidents. Staff members are afraid to report her because she controls their schedules and can make their work difficult." Thomas felt both anger and sadness wash over him. This was not just about one person being rude. This was a system of discrimination that had been allowed to continue for years. "Set up that meeting, James. It's time for change. Already working on it. I told Richardson's secretary it's about potential business collaboration. Should I tell them Williams Property Group?" "Not yet. Keep it general for now." The next morning, Thursday, Thomas woke before dawn. He had spent the night thinking about his strategy. After a quick breakfast, he dressed in his most expensive suit, a charcoal gray Savile Row creation that had cost more than most people's monthly salary. He chose a silk tie that his mother had given him years ago. She had saved for months to buy it when he graduated university. Thomas drove to the resort again, this time in his Bentley rather than the rented car. He arrived at 9 in the morning when the lobby would be busy with late checkouts and early arrivals. He parked in a visitor space and grabbed his leather briefcase, the one that held contracts and documents that could change lives. Inside the lobby, he chose a chair with a clear view of the front desk. He ordered coffee and opened his laptop, looking every bit like a business executive waiting for a meeting. From his position, he could observe Emma Thompson's interactions with guests. For an hour, he watched and took mental notes. Emma moved between the front desk and the concierge area. She talked on her phone, directed staff, and dealt with guests. When well-dressed white guests approached, her entire attitude changed. Her spine straightened, her voice became sweeter, and she smiled with practiced charm. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. So wonderful to see you again. How was your trip to France?" "Mrs. Williams, I've already upgraded your room to an ocean view. I hope you'll enjoy the new decor." But at 10:15 a.m., an elderly black couple entered through the revolving doors. The husband supported his wife's arm gently as they walked. They moved, slowly, speaking quietly to each other. Both were well-dressed in classic styles that suggested neither youth nor affluence. Thomas watched Emma's demeanor change instantly. Her smile disappeared. Her posture became rigid. She didn't move toward them to greet them as she had done with other guests. When the couple approached the front desk, Emma looked down at her computer screen instead of making eye contact. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked bluntly without a greeting. "Yes, we're the Millers," the elderly gentleman replied politely. "We booked for lunch at the Garden Restaurant." Emma frowned. "Let me check." She typed slowly, taking far longer than necessary. "I don't see anything under Miller." "We made the reservation last week," the wife said softly. "We're celebrating our 50th anniversary." "Well, I don't have any record of it. Are you sure you called the right hotel?" Emma's tone suggested they had made a mistake. "We have the confirmation. Email," the husband offered, reaching into his pocket. "That won't be necessary." Emma waved his hand away. "I'll see if I can find you a table, but it might take a while. The restaurant is very busy today." She made them wait at the desk while she pretended to call the restaurant. Thomas could see the hostess stand from where he sat. It was empty, with several unoccupied tables visible. The elderly couple waited patiently, but Thomas could see the embarrassment in their eyes. The husband patted his wife's hand reassuringly. They had faced this kind of treatment before. They knew not to make a scene. They would wait quietly, accept whatever treatment they received, and hope for the best. That resigned acceptance. Thomas recognized it immediately. It was the same look his mother had worn countless times. The look of someone who expected discrimination and had learned to endure it. "Not anymore," Thomas whispered to himself. He stood up, leaving his laptop and briefcase at the table. He walked deliberately toward the front desk, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. As he approached, Emma glanced up and her eyes widened. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by concern. "Mr. Thompson," Thomas said with calm authority, addressing the elderly man. "I couldn't help overhearing. I'm having lunch at the Garden Restaurant myself. Would you and Mrs. Thompson like to join me as my guests?" The couple looked surprised and grateful. Before Emma could respond, Thomas continued. "I'll speak to the manager personally about your anniversary celebration. I'm sure there was simply a computer error with your reservation." Emma's face paled. She knew she had been caught. She forced a smile. "Oh yes, I see it now in the system. The Millers. Table for 2 at 12:30. "Wonderful," Thomas replied, still maintaining his polite demeanor. "I look forward to celebrating with you at lunch." As the elderly couple thanked him and moved toward the restaurant, Thomas's phone buzzed. It was a text from James. "Meeting confirmed tomorrow at 2 p.m. with Charles Richardson." Thomas smiled. Tomorrow would bring change, but today he could at least ensure 2 people enjoyed their anniversary celebration without prejudice. That afternoon, James called again. "Thomas, I have the meeting arranged. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Richardson wants to know more about the business opportunity." "Perfect. Don't worry about details yet. Tomorrow will reveal everything." As Thomas returned to London that evening, He felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation. The sadness came from witnessing continued discrimination. The anticipation came from knowing he had the power to change it. Tomorrow, Emma Thompson would face the consequences of her actions. Tomorrow, Greenfield Resort would begin a new chapter. And tomorrow, children like that little girl by the pool would have one less example of injustice to witness. The end use, a warm, empathetic tone. The next morning, Thomas drove to Greenfield Resort one final time. His Bentley glided smoothly through Brighton's streets as early sunlight painted the buildings gold. He arrived at exactly 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before his meeting with Charles Richardson. At the main entrance, a different valet greeted him, with professional courtesy. Thomas handed over his keys and entered the lobby. Today was different. Today he carried power in his briefcase. The owner's office was on the third floor, accessible by a private elevator. Thomas had never seen this part of the resort before. The carpet was thick beneath his feet and original artwork lined the walls. A secretary with gray hair smiled warmly as he approached her desk. "Mr. Williams? Mr. Richardson is expecting you. Please go right in." Thomas took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy oak door. The office was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean, and leather-bound books filled custom shelves. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat Charles Richardson. The owner was older than Thomas expected, perhaps in his late 60s. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he wore an expensive navy suit. Despite his age, his handshake was firm, and his blue eyes were sharp with intelligence. "Mr. Williams, welcome." "Thank you for meeting with me," Charles said warmly. "Please, sit down. James mentioned you want to discuss a business opportunity?" Thomas settled into a leather chair. "Yes, Mr. Richardson, I own Williams Property Group. We develop luxury hotels and resorts across Europe." "Of course. I should have recognized the name. I've heard excellent things about your projects." Charles leaned forward with interest. Before Thomas could continue, there was a sharp knock at the door. Without waiting for permission, Emma Thompson burst into the office. She wore her usual crisp white shirt and black skirt, her manager's badge pinned perfectly straight. "Mr. Richardson, I need to discuss the Schmidt reservation. There's been a confusion with their—" Emma stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes locked with Thomas's and all color drained from her face. The confidence in her posture crumbled like wet sand. "Emma," Charles said, looking confused. "What is it?" Thomas stood up slowly, giving Emma a moment to process the situation. He watched her mind racing, connecting dots she hadn't seen before. The man she had humiliated at the pool was now in her boss's office, dressed in a 5,000-pound suit. "You two know each other?" Charles looked between them. "Mr. Williams," Emma began shakily, "I didn't realize—" "At the pool? I was just following procedures." "The pool?" Charles raised an eyebrow. His gaze moved to Thomas. "What happened at the pool?" Thomas maintained steady eye contact with Emma. "Ms. Thompson doesn't recognize me. Should I remind her?" Emma's professional mask completely shattered. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the notepad she carried. I thought you looked," she stammered. "He looked like what, Emma?" Charles asked sharply. His pleasant demeanor shifted as he sensed something was wrong. Thomas gently raised a hand. "Mr. Richardson, may I show you something?" He opened his briefcase and removed a folder prepared by James's investigative team. "These are photographs and reports from this week alone," Thomas explained calmly. He laid out several photos on Charles's desk. "They document Ms. Thompson's interactions with guests." Emma tried to step forward, but her legs seemed frozen. The first photo showed her demanding identification from a well-dressed black man, the Nigerian businessman James had mentioned. In it, she stood with arms crossed while the man searched through his wallet. "This gentleman had already checked in and paid for 2 nights, Thomas explained, but Ms. Thompson required him to prove he could afford to stay here. The second photo captured her ordering an Indian family to wait, while she searched for missing towels they supposedly stole. In the background, housekeeping staff looked uncomfortable. They had asked for extra towels for their children, Thomas continued. She accused them of theft in front of other guests. Charles's face turned red as he examined the evidence. Emma opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "This is from this week alone," Thomas said gently. "Your manager has been turning away paying customers and embarrassing guests based on their appearance. These are taken out of context." Emma finally found her voice. "I was just being careful. We have to protect our guests from what?" Thomas interrupted. "From me? I was your paying guest. I showed my room key." Charles stood up, his blue eyes now hard as steel. "Emma, is this true? Have you been discriminating against our guests?" "I was protecting the resort's image," she protested. "Some people just don't belong in places like this. Look at him at the pool. He looked like he worked here, not like a guest." The words hung in the air like poison. Charles's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Ms. Thompson has worked here for 10 years, he said to Thomas. "I trusted her completely. I had no idea." "There's more," Thomas said quietly. He pulled out James's full report. 5 documented complaints this year alone, all involving guests of color. Each time the incidents were dismissed or covered up. Emma's defenses crumbled. "I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to maintain standards." "Whose standards?" Thomas asked softly. "My mother cleaned hotel rooms for 30 years. She faced this same treatment. I built my business so people like her could be treated with dignity." Charles sat back down, rubbing his temples. When he looked up, his decision was clear. "Emma," he said firmly, "I'll give you 30 minutes to clear out your office. You're terminated immediately, and I'll make sure other resorts know about this." Emma looked as if she might faint. "But, Mr. Richardson, I've worked here for—" "The only reason I'm not calling the police for discrimination is because Mr. Williams is here. In his position, I might have already filed a lawsuit." Charles's voice was ice. Emma gathered her notepad and turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back at Thomas. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "Neither was humiliating." "Your guests," Thomas replied. After Emma left, silence filled the office for several long moments. Finally, Charles spoke. "Mr. Williams, I am deeply sorry. This isn't who we are as a company. At least it's not who I thought we were." Thomas nodded slowly. "I believe you, Mr. Richardson. And there's something else you should know." He pulled out another document from his briefcase. "I own the property next door, the beachfront land you've been admiring for years. I bought it last month for £2 billion. Charles's eyes widened in surprise. "My original plan was to develop it into Williams Beacon Hotel and possibly partner with Greenfield Resort. We could create something extraordinary together. But my manager's behavior changed everything," Charles finished quietly. "Yes," Thomas agreed. "However, I'm willing to discuss that partnership if you're committed to making real changes, starting with comprehensive training for all staff and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination." Charles stood and extended his hand. "You have my word, Mr. Williams. We'll transform this place. No guest should ever experience what you did." Thomas shook his hand, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. This was why he had built his wealth, not just for himself, but to change systems that hurt people like his mother. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, Thomas and Charles began discussing plans that would not only create one of Europe's finest resort destinations, but also set new standards for equality in the hospitality industry. Emma Thompson's reign of prejudice had ended, and with it, a future where every guest would be judged by their humanity, not their skin color. The end use, a warm, empathetic tone. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book. On a warm Sunday afternoon in late autumn, Thomas Williams stood on the grand balcony of Williams Beacon Hotel. His flagship property had opened 3 months ago, rising from the land next to Greenfield Resort like a promise fulfilled. The building's white walls gleamed in the sunshine, with curved balconies that reminded him of ocean waves. From his balcony on the 10th floor, Thomas could see both hotels clearly. Next door, Greenfield Resort looked different now. Charles Richardson had invested millions in renovations, new paint, updated landscaping, and a welcoming entrance that said, "Everyone is welcome here." The two properties had become partners, creating something special on Brighton's coastline. Down on the beach, families enjoyed the autumn sun. The sand was dotted with colorful umbrellas and children building sandcastles. Thomas smiled as he watched people of all backgrounds sharing the space together. He remembered how empty this beach used to be, limited to paying guests only. Now both resorts kept their beaches open to everyone. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. The new diversity training program had trained over 500 hotel staff members across England in its first month. Hotels from London to Edinburgh were asking for the same program. Simple lessons about treating all guests with respect were changing how the industry worked. Thomas stepped back inside his hotel's presidential suite. The room was elegant but comfortable, with furniture that made people feel at home. He had designed every detail to welcome guests, not intimidate them. The biggest wall in the suite displayed photos from his mother's life, her wedding day, her graduation from a hotel management course she took when Thomas was in college, and her proud face when he opened his first hotel. "I wish you could see this, Mom," he whispered to her photograph. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, his assistant Diana handed him a folder marked "New Manager Applications." "Charles Richardson sent these over," she explained. "He wants your input on Emma Thompson's replacement." Thomas smiled. Charles had kept his promise about change. After Emma left, he had personally interviewed every staff member, listening to their concerns and ideas. 6 people had been promoted to management positions, including 2 women of color, who had been overlooked for years. Rebecca Mitchell got the job, Diana continued. "She started yesterday." "The young woman from Birmingham?" Thomas asked. "Yes. She worked her way up from housekeeping. The staff already love her." Later that afternoon, Thomas decided to visit Greenfield Resort. He wanted to see the changes with his own eyes. As he walked through the lobby, he noticed new signs welcoming guests in multiple languages. The staff wore badges with their names and a small rainbow pin showing their commitment to inclusion. At the pool area, he paused. This was where it all started 6 months ago. Now the space looked different. Charles had added more seating areas, making the pool accessible to everyone. New staff members moved around helping guests, their faces reflecting the training they had received. A voice called out from behind him. "Mr. Williams." Thomas turned to see a familiar face. Sophie ran toward him across the pool deck, her parents following more slowly. The young girl with dark skin whom he had seen that difficult day was back with her family. "We came back," Sophie exclaimed, her eyes bright with excitement. "My mom says the resort has changed everything." Thomas smiled and knelt down to her, level. The sun made Sophie's braids shine and her summer dress was bright yellow. "The building is the same, Sophie, but the hearts inside have changed." Sophie's mother, Mrs. Johnson, reached them. She touched Thomas's arm gently. "Thank you for what you did. Everyone is so kind now. The doorman remembered us from our last visit." The pool staff offered Sophie swimming lessons. Her husband joined them. During breakfast this morning, the chef asked about Sophie's favorite foods for tomorrow. Thomas felt warmth spreading through his chest. This was why he had stood up that day, not just for himself but for families like the Johnsons who deserved to enjoy their holidays without fear of discrimination. "Have you met the new manager yet?" Thomas asked. "Rebecca?" "Yes. She's wonderful," Mrs. Johnson replied. "She showed Sophie the new kids' club and even gave her a welcome gift." At that moment, Rebecca Mitchell herself approached. She was young, perhaps 30 years old, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. She wore the resort's uniform with confident pride. "Mr. Williams," Rebecca greeted him professionally. "Welcome back to Greenfield. Is there anything we can do to make your visit more comfortable?" Thomas chuckled. "No thank you, Rebecca. I'm just happy to see the positive changes." "We're grateful for the opportunity to improve," she replied. "The new training program helps us understand our guests better." It's not just about policies. It's about seeing the person behind every face. As Thomas left the resort later, he thought about how far everything had come. The difficult conversation with Emma had led to real change. Charles Richardson had not only kept his promises but exceeded them. Together, they had created a model that other hotels wanted to follow. That evening, Thomas called his mother's old number in Liverpool. His Aunt Mary answered as usual. "Aunt Mary, is Mom there?" "Yes, Thomas. Let me get her." His mother's voice came on the line. "Thomas, how's my successful son?" "Mom," he began. "Remember all those times you were treated badly at work because of how you looked?" "Of course, honey. Those were hard days." "Well, today something beautiful happened," Thomas said, his voice full of emotion. "Today, things got a little better." He told her about Sophie's family, about Rebecca, about the changes spreading across the hotel industry. His mother listened quietly, occasionally making small sounds of approval or amazement. "You did good, Thomas," she said finally. "You used your power for something larger than yourself." Later that night, Thomas stood on his hotel balcony one more time. The evening was cool, and stars appeared above the ocean. Below, both hotels glowed with warm light. Guests moved between the properties, laughing and talking. Some were having dinner at Williams Beacon, others enjoying drinks at Greenfield's new outdoor bar. Children played on the beach one last time before bedtime, their parents relaxed and happy. In the distance, he could see mixed families, black and white, young and old, locals and tourists, all enjoying the same space. Emma Thompson was gone, working in a factory where her prejudices couldn't hurt innocent people. But her departure had created room for Rebecca, for change, for hope. The young boy who once watched his mother face humiliation had grown into a man who could reshape how people treated each other. Thomas thought about all the Sophies in the world who could now enjoy their holidays without witnessing discrimination. All the mothers who could visit nice hotels without fear. All the employees who could work with dignity. "One person can change the world," his mother used to say. She had believed it about education, about working hard. Now Thomas understood she was right about something deeper, about human kindness and standing up for what's right. As the moon rose over Brighton, Thomas felt peace in his heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were still hotels to change, still people to train, still battles against prejudice to fight. But tonight, hope felt stronger than any fear. Because when one person decides to stand up for dignity, when one act of courage leads to many acts of change, the world becomes a little brighter. And that brightness grows with each choice to treat others with respect, spreading like sunshine until it warms everyone it touches. Hope grows when one person decides to stand up for what's right. When we change how we treat each other, we change the world. The end.